Hello and welcome back. Today we're talking about Chapter 20, Preventing Violence and Abuse. Our learning outcomes. We're going to differentiate between intentional and unintentional injuries. We're going to explain factors that can contribute to intentional acts of violence. We're going to discuss the prevalence of violence and groups that are at risk. We're going to talk about intimate partner violence. And some personal strategies for minimizing your risk of violence. And we're going to look at campus and community-wide strategies for preventing violence. So let's look at some terminology here. Violence and abuse. Violence is aggressive behavior that produces injuries and can result in death. Intentional injuries are injury, death, or psychological harm inflicted with intent to harm, while unintentional injuries are injury, death, psychological harm without premeditation or without intentionality. In the United States, violent crimes include some of these offenses: murder or non-negligent manslaughter, forcible rape, robbery, and aggravated assault. Numbers are kept for the prevalence and incidence of these violent crimes. And in the state of California, you can see here violent crimes and property crimes recorded since 1960. You can see that there has been a decrease in property crime since a peak in the late 1980s, and there has been a decrease in violent crime since a peak around 1990, and there's been a slight uptick in violent crime recently. However, violent crime rates remain relatively low in the state of California. On U.S. campuses, violence is one of the most prevalent problems on college campuses. Around 10% of women, around 6% of men report having been emotionally abused in the last 12 months. 8% of women and 1.3% of men report having been involved in a physically abusive relationship. Please get out of any physically abusive relationships. Nearly 1% of men and 3% of women report having been in a sexually abusive relationship. Again, get out of those relationships and report any sexual or physical abuse. So what are some factors contributing to violence? In the community context, unsafe neighborhoods can be sources of violence. Neighborhoods that are inadequately staffed with police, and neighborhoods that do not have requisite social services to support people are particularly at risk for violent crime. There are programs and policies in place that discourage violence. The best programs involve community leaders all the way through to the people in society that are have less socioeconomic advantage and are disenfranchised. Bringing people together to make sure every person is safe is really important. There are social norms that can contribute to violence, particularly male directed towards female violence. We need to constantly be aware of these social depictions of male on female violence, and be aware of them and reduce those and reduce exposure of people to those images and ideas. Extreme religious beliefs, political differences, these can contribute to violence in society and need to be addressed. There are breakdowns in the criminal justice system. Incarceration of young people without support can lead to cycles of violence and and mental health issues and lack of support of people with mental health issues continues to be a problem in violent crime. Another factor that can contribute to violence is anger. Anger can range from slight irritation through to rage, and if that rage is directed inappropriately at another individual, it can be destructive in nature, aggressive, and emotionally damaging. It is important to recognize anger in yourself or in other people, and to work to find safe environments to express anger. It is normal to be angry in life, but it is not normal to express that anger with violence. One needs to find safe environments to express anger where no person is going to be harmed. Unfortunately, there are a lot of depictions of violence in media, with gaming and movies and so forth. Arguably, Americans are exposed to more violence today than they have ever been exposed to in the past. This exposure to violent media is typically not a problem, but it can become a problem, particularly when it intersects with individuals with mental health problems and mental health issues. I would urge you also to monitor your responses to any graphic, violent material, and try to reduce your expressions of violence associated with those depictions. Unfortunately, homicide is the 15th leading cause of death in the United States. Most homicides are not random acts of violence. Most homicides, the victim will know the murderer. There are disparities in race and age and gender, one of the most obvious of which is that males commit murders at far higher rates than females. Again, this is associated with male violence and tolerance, or social norms tolerating male violence. In the United States, homicides are typically committed using weapons. Firearms are by far the most common weapon used in homicides. Even with tight gun control laws in the state of California, it is still very easy to obtain firearms. Bias-motivated crimes are a big problem regarding homicides and violence. Racially motivated bias is by far the largest cause of bias-motivated crimes, followed by religious and sexual orientation bias and gender identity bias. Domestic violence. Let's talk about domestic violence. This term refers to the use of force to control another person and to maintain power, particularly in a home environment. Domestic violence can occur between a parent and a child, between spouses or intimate partners, sometimes between siblings within a family, and at other times in generational violence between different generations within a family. Violence may involve emotional abuse, verbal abuse, threats of physical harm, and physical violence. If any of these things is occurring for you in your home environment, I urge you to contact the police and report any abuse that is going on, and make sure that you are in a safe environment as quickly as possible.